The Pacific Ocean, June 1944. Thunder cracks overhead as rain lashes down upon the deck of the USS Mason, a destroyer escort navigating through treacherous waters. Lieutenant James Harrington squints through salt-crusted binoculars, his hands trembling not from the cold, but from what lies beyond the horizon. Intelligence suggests the presence of the Yamato, Japan's mightiest battleship, a vessel so massive it had earned the whispered title, Invincible. "Sir, radio transmission coming in," calls Petty Officer Thomas Miller, his young face betraying the fear he struggles to hide. Task Force 58 reports possible enemy fleet movement. Harrington's mind flashes to the photograph tucked inside his breast pocket, his brother Robert, lost when the USS Arizona sank at Pearl Harbor. The weight of vengeance and duty presses down on him heavier than the thunderclouds above. "They say it's unsinkable," whispers Ensign David Chin, standing beside him. "That no American weapon can penetrate its armor." Harrington's jaw tightens. "Nothing is invincible, Chin. Nothing." Below decks, Naval Intelligence Officer Eliza Crawford studies classified documents. Intelligence reports indicating something nobody else knows. A fatal flaw in the Japanese super-battleship's design, information that cost 3 undercover agents their lives to obtain. As the ship pitches violently, a single sheet slides from her folder, revealing a diagram marked with a blood-red circle around the vessel's ammunition storage compartments. "God help us all if we're wrong about this," she whispers as distant flashes illuminate the horizon, not lightning, but the opening salvos of what would become one of the most consequential naval encounters of the Pacific War. 3 years earlier, December 7, 1941. Lieutenant James Harrington and his younger brother Robert stand on the deck of the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The morning sun bathes everything in golden light as they share cigarettes and dreams of returning home to their family farm in Nebraska. "When this tour ends, I'm asking Marie to marry me," Robert says, showing James a small ring box. "What do you think?" Before James can answer, the distant drone of aircraft engines cuts through the peaceful morning. What follows is chaos, explosions, screams, and fire. The last image James has of his brother is Robert pushing him into the water before a massive explosion tears through the Arizona. "I should have died with him," James confesses to Eliza Crawford in the cramped intelligence room of the USS Mason in 1944. 3 years later and I still see him in my dreams, telling me to jump." Eliza's face softens momentarily before hardening back into professional detachment. "Your survivor's guilt won't help us sink the Yamato, Lieutenant." The Yamato, a monster of engineering, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Displacing over 70,000 tons, armed with 9 18.1-inch guns, the largest ever mounted on a warship. Its armor built up to 16 inches thick, deemed impenetrable by American naval planners. In a flashback to Annapolis Naval Academy, 1939, a young Professor William Donovan lectures to a classroom that includes both James Harrington and Thomas Miller. "Naval warfare is changing, gentlemen. The battleship era is ending. The future belongs to aircraft carriers and submarines." Back in the present, Admiral Chester Nimitz addresses his fleet commanders. Intelligence suggests the Yamato will be deployed to defend the Marianas. If Japan loses these islands, they lose the war, and they know it. They're sending their best. Meanwhile, in the small town of Millfield, Ohio, Ensign David Chen's family faces discrimination and suspicion despite the "Americans all" poster in their restaurant window. A flashback shows Chen's tearful goodbye to his parents. "I have to prove we belong," he tells them. "I have to fight twice as hard." Aboard the Mason, the ship's chaplain, Father Patrick Sullivan, conducts a quiet service for men with haunted eyes. "Even in our darkest hour, light finds a way," he tells them, his own faith tested by witnessing too many young men consigned to the deep. Eliza Crawford, in her quarters, stares at a coded message. Her journey to this moment began at Vassar College, where she studied linguistics before being recruited by naval intelligence. A photograph on her desk shows her standing beside a Japanese-American man, Tadashi Yamamoto, her former fiancé, now interned at Manzan. The painful irony of using her knowledge of Japanese culture and language to defeat Japan isn't lost on her. The ship's radio operator, Tony Morelli from Brooklyn, receives a transmission about his neighborhood. His brother's bakery has been vandalized with fascist painted on the windows, despite his brother currently fighting in Italy. We're fighting for America on two fronts, he tells Miller. Over there and back home. As dawn breaks, Captain William Harrison calls his officers to the briefing room. Maps show the expected position of the Japanese fleet. This isn't just about sinking a ship, he tells them. This is about breaking Japan's spirit. They believe the Yamato is divine, protected by the Emperor's will. When it goes down, so does their myth of invincibility. Hey folks, if you're enjoying this historical journey, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from. Drop a comment below and let me know what corner of the globe you're tuning in from. As the briefing ends, James catches Eliza alone with the ship's executive officer, Commander Richard Blackwood, examining what appears to be blueprints of the Yamato. When James approaches, they quickly roll up the documents. Need to know basis, Lieutenant, Blackwood says coldly. As James turns to leave, Eliza touches his arm. Trust me, James. Some secrets are better left buried, until the right moment. The USS Mason joins Task Force 58, a formidable assemblage of American naval power, aircraft carriers, cruisers, and destroyers stretching across the horizon. The magnitude of the force reflects the gravity of their mission, to intercept and destroy the Yamato before it can reach and reinforce the Japanese defenders at Saipan. In the officers' mess, tension builds between James Harrington and Commander Blackwood. The Yamato isn't just another battleship, Blackwood argues, his knuckles white around his coffee cup. We need a coordinated aerial assault, torpedoes to slow her, bombs to crack her deck. And what if weather prevents our planes from launching? James counters. We need destroyer squadrons ready for direct engagement. That's suicide, Lieutenant. Blackwood slams his hand on the table. You want to send our boys in thin-skinned destroyers against those 18-inch guns? Captain Harrison intervenes. Gentlemen, we'll prepare for all contingencies. Lieutenant Harrington, I want torpedo attack plans on my desk by 0600. Later, on night watch, James finds Ensign Chin staring at the stars. My grandfather taught me to navigate by these same stars, Chin says quietly. He said they're the same whether you're in China or America, they don't care about borders. Or who's fighting under them, James adds, seeing Chin in a new light. As dawn approaches, a crewman discovers classified documents in James's quarters, detailed schematics of the Yamato showing vulnerable points in its armor and propulsion systems. James is immediately confined to quarters under suspicion of espionage. Eliza Crawford storms into Captain Harrison's quarters. This is absurd. Lieutenant Harrington is being set up. By whom, Miss Crawford? And why? Harrison demands. I believe we have a leak, she reveals. Someone's been transmitting our position to the Japanese fleet. A search of the ship uncovers a hidden transmitter in Father Sullivan's quarters. When confronted, the chaplain breaks down. They have my sister in Manila, he confesses. They said they would kill her if I didn't cooperate. As military police escort Sullivan away, he locks eyes with James, now released but still under cloud of suspicion. The Yamato knows we're coming, Sullivan whispers. But they don't know what you know. Tension mounts as Eliza finally reveals her secret to James and Captain Harrison. The Yamato's armor has a critical flaw. The Japanese rushed its construction, and the steel plating near the ammunition magazines wasn't properly tempered. A concentrated attack there could trigger a catastrophic explosion. How did you come by this information? Harrison asks. Eliza hesitates before showing them a photograph. Tadashi Yamamoto. My fiancé. Before the war, he worked as an engineer at the Kure Naval Yard where Yamato was built. He smuggled out these specifications before being interned. The revelation divides the officers. Blackwood argues the intelligence could be deliberate misinformation. We can't risk the entire operation on information from a Japanese national. American, Eliza corrects sharply. Tadashi is American. As arguments intensify, A young radar operator interrupts with urgent news. Multiple contacts, bearing 270. It's the Japanese fleet, and the Yamato is with them. The following hours are a frenzy of preparation. Aircraft are armed and fueled on carrier decks. Destroyer squadrons form attack patterns. Meanwhile, James approaches Petty Officer Miller with a dangerous proposal. "I need a volunteer team for a special operation," James explains, spreading out Eliza's diagrams. "If we can get close enough in PT boats, we can plant charges directly on those weak points." Miller swallows hard. "That's a one-way mission, sir." "Probably," James admits. "But if it works, we save hundreds of American lives." As volunteers are quietly assembled, Captain Harrison confronts James. "This isn't authorized, Lieutenant." "With respect, sir, it's necessary," James replies. "My brother died because we weren't ready at Pearl. I won't let that happen again." After a tense moment, Harrison nods. "You have until dawn." After that, the air groups launch. As James prepares to depart with his volunteer team, Eliza finds him on the deck. "You don't have to do this to absolve yourself for surviving Pearl Harbor," she says. "This isn't about redemption," he responds. "It's about ending this war before we lose anyone else." Before he can board the PT boat, alarm klaxons sound throughout the fleet. The Japanese have launched a surprise night attack with torpedo bombers. In the chaos that follows, a direct hit strikes the USS Mason. As fires rage and men scramble to contain the damage, Commander Blackwood is mortally wounded. With his dying breath, he presses something into James's hand, a key to the secure intelligence safe. "I was wrong about you," Blackwood gasps. "About everything. The Yamato, it's not heading to Saipan. It's a diversion." Hey everyone! If you're finding this story of the Invincible Japanese battleship interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything as we try to reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Every subscription helps us bring more of these fascinating historical stories to life. As dawn breaks, the American fleet regroups, counting its losses. The mission parameters have changed drastically. Intelligence from the safe reveals the Yamato's true purpose, not to reinforce Saipan, but to draw the American fleet away from the real target, a massive troop convoy heading for the Philippines. James looks out at the horizon, where somewhere the massive silhouette of the Yamato waits. "We've been playing their game all along," he realizes. "Now it's time to change the rules." June 19, 1944, a date that would later be called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The morning sky fills with hundreds of American aircraft, Hellcat fighters, Avenger torpedo bombers, and Helldiver dive bombers, rising from carrier decks in carefully orchestrated waves. Below them, the vast Pacific churns with white-capped waves under storm clouds gathering on the horizon. James Harrington and his small team of volunteers have transferred to the USS Barton, a Fletcher-class destroyer positioned at the vanguard of the American fleet. Their modified plan: to use the destroyer as a platform to get close enough to launch a specialized strike team on motorized rafts, a desperate gambit born of necessity after losing their PT boats in the night attack. "Distance to target?" James asks, adjusting his life vest. "Approximately 18 miles and closing," responds the radar operator. "We've got visual confirmation. It's her all right, the Yamato." Through his binoculars, James sees it, a monstrous silhouette breaking the horizon, flanked by cruisers and destroyers in protective formation. The Yamato's massive main guns, capable of hurling 1-ton shells over 20 miles, slowly rotate toward the American fleet. "All hands, brace for incoming," the captain shouts over the intercom. The sea erupts as the first salvo from Yamato's 18.1-inch guns lands startlingly close to the American ships, sending geysers of water hundreds of feet into the air. The concussive force rocks the destroyer violently. "They've got our range already," Miller says, his face pale. "We'll never get close enough." Above, American aircraft begin their attack runs. Torpedo bombers approach dangerously low to the water while dive bombers plummet from above. The sky around the Yamato erupts with anti-aircraft fire, a lethal curtain of flak that tears through the attacking planes. James watches in horror as aircraft after aircraft bursts into flames or spirals into the ocean. Those men knew the risks, Ensign Shin says quietly beside him, though his trembling hands betray his own fear. The first wave of attacks seems ineffective. Torpedoes explode against the Yamato's armored hull without penetrating, while bombs bounce off its reinforced deck. The Japanese battleship continues its advance, seemingly unharmed, living up to its reputation as invincible. "We need to target the weak points Eliza identified," James insists to the Barton's captain. "Our pilots don't know about the vulnerabilities in the magazine armor." As they argue, a massive explosion rocks the nearby carrier USS Lexington. A Japanese dive bomber has broken through the combat air patrol. Flames engulf the carrier's deck, incinerating planes and men alike. "We're losing this fight," the captain admits grimly. "One more pass from their main guns and we're finished." James makes a decision. Using the ship's radio, he contacts the air group commanders directly, violating protocol to share Eliza's intelligence about the Yamato's vulnerable points. "Target coordinates Charlie 7 and Delta 3 on the ship's blueprints," he instructs. "Concentrate all remaining torpedoes there." On the carrier flagship, Admiral Spruance hears of Harrington's unauthorized transmission. "Who the hell is this lieutenant to change our attack strategy?" he demands. Eliza Crawford, having been transferred to the Admiral's staff, steps forward. "Sir, he has intelligence that could change the outcome. I can vouch for its authenticity." "If you're wrong, we lose this battle and possibly the war," Spruance warns. "If we continue as planned, we definitely lose," she counters. As the Admiral considers, the Yamato launches another devastating salvo. This time, the cruiser USS Indianapolis takes a direct hit, its midsection obliterated instantly. Hundreds of men are thrown into the oil-slicked, burning water. "Very well," Spruance finally agrees. "Redirect the attack groups." The remaining American aircraft regroup and approach the Yamato from a new angle, concentrating their attack on the specific points identified in Eliza's intelligence. Japanese anti-aircraft fire claims more American planes, their pilots making the ultimate sacrifice as they drive their burning aircraft directly toward their targets. Below decks on the Yamato, Chief Engineer Hiroshi Nakamura notices something alarming: water pressure dropping in the cooling systems near the aft magazines. An American torpedo has created a small breach in precisely the area where the armor was compromised during rushed construction. He reports to the bridge, but his warning is dismissed by the captain, who is focused on their seemingly successful defense against the American attack. As the battle reaches its crescendo, Father Sullivan, now detained on the flagship, breaks free from his guards and makes his way to the communications room. "I need to warn them," he gasps to the startled radio men. "The Japanese changed frequencies. They're positioning submarines directly in our path." James and his team abandon their plan to approach by water when they see the new wave of American aircraft executing the precise attack pattern he suggested. "Look," he points as torpedoes strike the Yamato exactly where Eliza's diagrams indicated vulnerability. For a moment, nothing happens. The massive battleship continues its advance, guns still firing. Then, a small explosion erupts near its waterline, followed by another. Smoke begins to pour from ventilation shafts. Aboard the Yamato, panic spreads as internal fires reach the primary magazine. Captain Yamato orders flooding of the compartments, but it's too late. The damage control systems, compromised by the torpedo hits, fail to respond. "All hands, abandon ship," he orders solemnly, the first such command ever given on the mighty Yamato. The sea around the American fleet suddenly erupts as Japanese submarines, lying in wait, launch their torpedoes. The USS Barton takes a direct hit, breaking apart and sinking rapidly. James, Miller, and Chen find themselves struggling in the water amid burning oil and debris. As they cling to floating wreckage, they witness the unthinkable: the Yamato, Japan's greatest warship, torn apart by a series of catastrophic internal explosions. The unsinkable battleship breaks in half, its massive components disappearing beneath the waves within minutes, taking thousands of Japanese sailors with it. "My God," Miller whispers, the horror of so much death momentarily overshadowing their victory. In the distance, American rescue vessels begin picking up survivors from both the Barton and other damaged American ships. As a rescue boat approaches, James realizes Chin is no longer beside him. Diving beneath the burning surface, James searches desperately until he finds Chin trapped under debris, unconscious and sinking. With his remaining strength, James frees him and pulls him to the surface, where both men are hauled aboard a rescue craft. As medics work frantically to revive Chin, James watches the place where the mighty Yamato disappeared. "The Invincible falls," he murmurs, "but at what cost?" Naval Hospital, Pearl Harbor, August 1944. James Harrington sits beside Ensign Chen's bed, reading aloud from Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls. Chen's recovery has been slow, his lungs damaged from the oil and seawater he inhaled before James pulled him from the wreckage. "The doctors say you'll be shipping home next week," James tells him, closing the book. Chin shakes his head weakly. "What home? My parents' restaurant was vandalized again. They're living in the back room because no one will rent to Japs in Millfield." James's jaw tightens. This war has made monsters of us all in different ways. In another wing of the hospital, Petty Officer Miller undergoes physical therapy, learning to use his prosthetic leg after losing his own during the sinking of the Barton. His therapist, a nurse named Sarah Watkins, pushes him harder than the others. "I don't need your pity," he snaps one day after falling. "Good, because you won't get it," she replies calmly. "What you will get is your life back, if you're brave enough to fight for it." Something in her steady gaze reminds him of that day in the Pacific, the clarity that comes with facing death and choosing life instead. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Eliza Crawford stands before a panel of naval intelligence officers defending her actions and sources. The intelligence that led to the Yamato's destruction came at great personal cost, she explains. Tadashi Yamamoto died at Manzanar 3 weeks after providing those specifications, beaten by guards who discovered his communications with me. "Regrettable," says Admiral Forrestal coldly, "but his information saved countless American lives." "He was an American," Eliza insists, her voice breaking slightly. "His loyalty never wavered even as we questioned it." The sinking of the Yamato has shifted the war's momentum dramatically. Japanese naval power is effectively broken, their myth of invincibility shattered. Yet the human cost lingers in nightmares, physical scars, and emotional wounds that refuse to heal. At the Nebraska farm where he grew up, James visits his parents, bringing news that his brother Robert's body has finally been recovered from the USS Arizona. His mother touches the telegram with trembling fingers. "At least we can bring him home now," she whispers. His father, a veteran of the First World War, understands the haunted look in his surviving son's eyes. "You did what needed doing, son. Same as your brother." "I lived while he died," James says, the survivor's guilt still raw. "And I lived while others died at Midway." His father's weathered hand grips his shoulder. "Living can be the hardest part of war, James. But it's the only way to make their sacrifices matter." In Honolulu, Father Sullivan serves his sentence in a military prison, writing letters that will never be sent to a sister who, he later learns, died in Manila months before he betrayed his oath. Each Sunday, against regulations, James visits him. "Why do you come?" Sullivan asks one day. "I'm the reason your friends died on the Barton." "I come because forgiveness is harder than hatred," James answers. "And I need the practice." By December 1944, James has been promoted to lieutenant commander and assigned to a new destroyer, the USS Laffey. Before shipping out, he receives a package from Eliza, now working at the newly formed United Nations Planning Committee. Inside is a journal belonging to Tadashi Yamamoto, with a note. He would have wanted someone to remember him as he truly was. The journal reveals Tadashi's deep love for America, his anguish at being suspected of disloyalty, and his ultimate decision to share the Yamato's vulnerabilities, knowing it might cost his life but save thousands of others. On a cold January morning in 1945, as American forces prepare for the invasion of Iwo Jima, Miller, now an instructor at Great Lakes Naval Training Station, addresses a new class of recruits. His prosthetic leg is visible beneath his uniform. You've heard stories about the Yamato, he tells them, about how American ingenuity and courage sank the unsinkable. What you haven't heard is how it changed us, not just the war, but our understanding of who we are. He describes the moment when the massive battleship exploded, taking thousands of Japanese sailors with it. They weren't faceless enemies then. They were men like us, following orders, believing in their cause, dying far from home. Remember that when you face the enemy. In Philadelphia, Chen's family relocates after continued harassment in Ohio. They open a new restaurant, where Chen works while attending night classes at Temple University on the GI Bill. His lungs never fully recover, leaving him with a persistent cough, but his mind remains sharp. He studies engineering, determined to help rebuild what war has destroyed. On the anniversary of the Yamato's sinking, the survivors of Task Force 58 hold a private ceremony. James, Miller, Chen, and Eliza gather along with dozens of others who were there that day. Admiral Nimitz, now Fleet Admiral, addresses them. History will record the sinking of the Yamato as a turning point in the Pacific War, he says. What it cannot record is the cost paid by those of you here today, not just in blood and pain, but in the burden of memory you carry. After the ceremony, the four friends walk along the Washington Mall, their conversation turning to the future. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki have ended the war, but introduced new terrors. We thought the Yamato was the ultimate weapon, Miller says quietly. We had no idea what was coming. Technology changes, but people don't, Eliza responds. We still have to choose between fear and understanding, between hatred and reconciliation. As they reach the Lincoln Memorial, they find a Japanese-American family placing flowers at the foot of the statue. The father, seeing Chen's uniform, bows slightly. Chen returns the gesture, then extends his hand in the American way. The world is changing, James observes. The question is whether we'll change with it or fight to keep it the same. That night, in his hotel room, James finally opens the letter he's carried since Pearl Harbor, Robert's last letter home, recovered from his personal effects. In it, his brother speaks of his hopes for the future, for a world where nations settle differences without sending young men to die in distant oceans. If I don't make it back, Robert had written, don't waste your life on vengeance, Jamie. Build something better instead. James places the letter beside Tadashi's journal on his nightstand, two voices from beyond the grave, both speaking of a better world that neither lived to see. In the final pages of the journal, Tadashi had written words that now echo in James's mind. The true measure of a nation's strength is not in its battleships or bombs, but in its capacity for justice, even toward those it fears. As dawn breaks over Washington, James makes a decision. He will not return to sea. Instead, he accepts a position with the War Crimes Tribunal, determined to ensure that justice, not vengeance, defines the peace. The sinking of the Yamato didn't just change the war, it changed those who survived it, teaching them that victory without wisdom is merely postponing the next conflict. In its destruction, the mighty battleship offered one final lesson. Nothing is truly invincible, neither ships of steel nor ideas of hatred, when confronted with the courage to see beyond the horizon of one's own certainty. Washington, D.C., 1995, dedication of the World War II Memorial. An elderly James Harrington, now 75, stands before the newly unveiled memorial, his medals catching the spring sunlight. Beside him are Thomas Miller in a wheelchair, David Chen leaning on a cane, and Eliza Crawford Harrington, his wife of 48 years. They are among the dwindling number of veterans who remember firsthand the day the Invincible Yamato sank beneath the waves, taking with it Japan's naval supremacy and the lives of nearly 3,000 sailors. I never thought we'd live to see this, Chen says quietly, gesturing to the Japanese ambassador standing among the dignitaries, the grandson of Admiral Yamamoto. Or that, Miller adds, nodding toward their own grandchildren, playing together on the memorial steps, unburdened by the hatreds that once divided nations. James places a weathered hand on the cool marble of the memorial. The Yamato was called unsinkable, he reflects. But in the end, it wasn't steel or firepower that determined our futures, it was the choices we made after the guns fell silent. Behind them, a tour guide tells visitors about the Pacific War, about how American planes sank the mightiest battleship ever built. The official story, sanitized and simplified. They'll never know, Eliza whispers. Not really. Maybe they don't need to, James replies. Maybe it's enough that we remember the whole truth, so they can live in a world where such sacrifices aren't necessary. As they turn to leave, a young Japanese tourist approaches them, noticing their veteran caps. He bows respectfully. My grandfather served on the Yamato, he says in careful English. He was one of the few survivors. He told me to thank any American veterans I met, not for the victory, but for rebuilding Japan afterward. James shakes the young man's hand, feeling the circle of history closing. Tell your grandfather we finally understand what he meant. The true legacy of those who faced the Yamato wasn't just in their courage during battle, but in their wisdom during peace, recognizing that former enemies could become allies, that wounds could heal, and that the human spirit, unlike even the mightiest battleship, truly is invincible. From the sinking of an unsinkable ship came the seeds of an unbreakable peace, proving that sometimes the greatest victories come not from destroying what we fear, but from building what we hope for. If you found this story of courage, sacrifice, and redemption moving, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful historical narratives that explore the human dimension of history's greatest conflicts. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know which historical events you'd like us to explore next. Until next time, remember that understanding our past is the surest way to navigate our future.